Welcome to the Explainer. You know, when we talk about the exploration and production industry, we usually obsess over the physical outputs, right? The barrels of oil, the cubic feet of gas. But as we dive into these sustainability accounting standards today, we're going to see that the most pressing, catastrophic risks, they aren't geological at all. They're actually deeply ethical. So let me pose a question to you right off the bat. What is an oil and gas company's absolute most fragile asset? I mean, you might immediately think of those massive offshore rigs, the sprawling pipelines, or even the billion-dollar physical reserves themselves. But while those are obviously incredibly valuable, an exploration company's most critical asset is actually entirely intangible. It's what we call the social license to operate. Basically, this is the ongoing support and approval from local communities and host governments. And an E&P company absolutely has to have this social license just to access reserves without facing crippling disruptions. The sustainability standards make it super clear that unethical behavior, things like bribery or shady hidden payments, can literally destroy this fragile asset overnight. The second you lose the trust of the community or the government, those multi-billion-dollar physical assets, they become stranded. Operations just grind to a complete halt.
Section 1. High stakes, hidden traps, competing for global reserves.
See, because E&P companies are in this intense, cutthroat competition for geographically fixed resources, they can't exactly just pick and choose the easiest places to work. They're frequently pushed into operating in countries with, frankly, pretty weak governance and really high corruption risks. And the consequences of falling into those hidden traps, they are severe. We're talking about massive one-time financial hits from regulatory fines, permanently escalating compliance costs, and of course, that catastrophic loss of the social license to operate we just talked about. In the absolute worst-case scenarios, a company could face a total loss of their operational capability in a region. Game over. Section 2. The X-ray lens, measuring risk exposure. So how do we actually measure this? Well, investors need an X-ray lens to look way past the surface-level financials. Take a look at the specific framework SASB provides here. Right under business ethics and transparency, there are two key metrics perfectly designed to capture these hidden geopolitical risks. We've got EM-EP 510A.1, which tracks geographic reserve locations, and EM-EP 510A.2, which evaluates the specific management systems a company uses to prevent bribery. Now, the crucial point to zero in on here is the number 20. Under that first metric, companies are actually required to analyze their operations against Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. They have to publicly identify if they're operating in countries that hold the 20 lowest rankings on that entire index. This is a brilliant move because it takes the abstract, kind of squishy concept of being corruption-prone and turns it into a very concrete, comparable data point for anyone looking at the company. And it gets even more specific. Under metric 510A1, companies have to calculate and disclose the percentage, by volume, of both their proved and probable reserves located in these top 20 highest-risk countries. By splitting the disclosure out this way, between proved and probable, investors get this incredibly precise, quantified picture of exactly how much of a company's future value is currently resting on ethically shaky ground. Section 3. The Armor, Systems for Prevention.
Okay, so once a company knows its exposure, it desperately needs armor against the immense, everyday pressure of corruption. And that brings us right to the second SASB metric, 510A.2. Entities have to explicitly describe their overarching management systems for assessing and managing these bribery risks. The goal here is pretty blunt, but absolutely necessary. Prevent corruption and bribery throughout the entire value chain. Just putting out a PR statement saying we don't pay bribes doesn't cut it anymore. You have to prove exactly how you stop it from happening. And a genuinely robust defense system requires very specific structural elements. To make sure companies aren't willfully or honestly even unintentionally participating in unethical payments, they need comprehensive employee awareness programs. They need secure internal mechanisms for reporting violations, ironclad anti-corruption policies, and, crucially, they must apply the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, or EITI standard. Section 4. Beyond direct operations, value chain transparency. Now here is where the challenge really scales up, because ethical policies cannot just stop at the company's own front door. They have to extend out to customers, suppliers, contractors, subcontractors, and joint partners. Why? Because the risk is exactly the same if a local subcontractor pays a bribe on your behalf. To manage this massive web, companies turn to those EITI provisions we just mentioned. This creates a completely watertight paper trail. It involves rigorous beneficial ownership tracking, screening for politically exposed persons,
radical transparency in licensing and contracts, and incredibly precise tracking of project-level and subnational payments. It's really all about shining a blinding light into every dark corner of local government interaction and social expenditure.
But it doesn't stop with internal systems. Companies can really solidify their reputation by disclosing their alignment with international gold standard frameworks. The SASB standards actually highlight several of these, including the OECD Anti-Corruption Guidelines, the ICC Rules of Conduct, Transparency International's Business Principles, the UN Global Compact's 10th Principle, and the World Economic Forum's Partnering Against Corruption Initiative. Showing that you align with these frameworks proves to the market that your entity is operating at the absolute highest global standard to combat extortion and bribery.
Which leaves us with this final, pretty provocative thought. Is full transparency the ultimate cost of doing business in the 21st century? Based on the standards we've just explored, the future of global energy exploration really does depend entirely on the strength of a company's ethics. The physical oil and gas might be sitting right there in the ground, but the permission to actually extract it, that critical social license to operate, well, that's granted by the public and by host governments. And in today's hyper-connected world, radical transparency and rigorous ethical standards are pretty much the only currency that buys that kind of trust. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gives you a whole new perspective on the invisible ethical forces that are shaping the energy industry today. Catch you next time.